I got a pretty decent one for you. It involves two movies today. It's a release that just came out, and one of them is a movie that came straight to TV on CBS years ago, 1981. And this movie blew up all over the TV waves, so let's talk about it. What's up, guys, and welcome back to Beyond the Void Horror Podcast. My name is Alex, and today we're going to be doing a spoiler-free review and an unboxing of VCI Entertainment's double feature of Dark Night of the Scarecrow 1 and 2 on 4K. Bubba didn't do it. Anyway, so I'm going to try to do this in one take. It might be a little rough around the edges, but I got some catching up to do. So I want to get more content out there for you guys. So forgive me. But we are going to do a review of both of these movies in a quick fashion since, it's only going to be one video. And then I'll tell you all of the ingredients on the discs and what looks like inside and everything afterwards in the unboxing. Dark Night of the Scarecrow is a movie that I was familiar with for many years, and it was actually something that I had seen multiple times, and it's been a little while since the last time I saw it, although it feels like I did it on the podcast for some reason, or at least watched it within the last, I don't know how many years. But rewatching it this time was actually a really good experience, and I kind of like this movie. There are things about it that work and things that are a little dated, and there are things about it that make you wonder why they made a sequel. More on that later. Dark Night of the Scarecrow Part 1 from 1981 is about a man who is mentally disabled. He has kind of the mind of a child, very pure, very innocent. He's playing with a young girl like he normally does. Something happens to the girl where he has to save her life. She gets injured in the process, and some of the townspeople kind of suspect that it might be him since he's, different. When they find him, they end up taking him out, and he ends up dying, and they go to court. And the craziest thing happens. The court lets him off on a technicality because there's no witnesses or anything. He was shot 27 times. Some things never change, I guess. So, after this happens, of course, each one of them starts disappearing or dying in weird, crazy ways. And who's doing it? Is it the mom? Is it a little girl? Is it Bubba? Is it a ghost? What the hell is it? Well, it's Dark Night of the Scarecrow. And I really enjoy this movie. I think it's actually a pretty solid film. It's a slasher film, and it's a film that, is kind of creepy in a lot of ways. They do a lot of things in the movie that really kind of pace this along in a way that is very creepy without having to use too much gore or anything. As I mentioned, this is a movie that was put on TV, so, there is blood, but they don't really show too much. It's more intended. But, man, do they do a really particularly decent and significant job of developing an atmosphere for this movie. Some of the music that goes with it is actually pretty interesting, and it makes it flow really well. And there's a lot of pretty good performances in this movie. Now, we have some actors in the movie that you may or may not recognize, but my two favorites are Larry Drake, who went on to do stuff with Sam Raimi. Do you recall Darkman? Larry Drake was a part of that franchise, and also Dr. Giggles. But one I think is one of the more standout performances in this movie is Charles Durning, who is the sort of ringleader of these vigilantes. He plays a postman, pretty unhinged in this movie, and does do a good job of making you feel uncomfortable with the way he handles things, because one thing after another, one person dies, they start panicking because they got out of court and didn't have to get charged with murder for some reason. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but for the sake of the story, this kind of feels like a Twilight Zone Tales from the Crypt, lesson learned kind of story, where if you do something bad will happen to you. You know, it's just one of those kind of stories where these guys get picked off, and the mystery of who it is pretty good at covering it up. Like, they don't show anybody. You just kind of wonder what's going on. And by the end of the movie, it's kind of a cool little thing. And I think a lot of people, after watching this movie, really wanted to see a lot more, for good reason, because it was pretty creepy and it did a really good job on a movie that isn't even like rated R. It's made for TV. But yeah, I really like it. I thought there were some really cool performances in here. There's a lot of really good storytelling, and it's just a classic story. It's the way that old stories have been told, and they put it on the screen, and it just feels like one big awesome episode of Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt. I really enjoy it. I think it's like a 7.5 out of 10. You know, there's a couple of things in it that are a little dated. The idea of having a grown man play a young boy was like a very popular thing in the 80s. And even in the 90s, because I think Robin Williams did a movie like that called Jack. It was just one of those things where they just wanted to challenge themselves, and they kind of make fun of it in Tropic Thunder with a movie that one of the actors did. But it's just one of those things, you know, it's an older movie, and so we have to forgive these things sometimes. Maybe they're a little rough around the edges, but I don't think it was like misrepresenting of anything, although I'm not one to speak on it, so I can't say for sure. I still enjoyed the movie. I still think it's a fun slasher. I think it's an underrated slasher. I just think it's a little rough around the edges in some spots. It does take a little while to get started, but when it does, it's like really fun and interesting, and you really want to pay attention. As far as the sequel goes, part 2, this was actually directed by J.D. Feigelson, who is the guy who wrote the first one. Frank DeFelitta is the guy who directed the first one as well. He actually was like a writer and a director for TV stuff, but he did a lot of different things, and he was not on the sequel. In fact, the person who did it was J.D. Feigelson, who initially always wanted to be a filmmaker and really had no idea what he was doing with writing. And Ray Bradbury helped him do the first movie, just give him kind of pointers and stuff. He went through like a multiple different drafts and things. With this movie, he kind of like had an idea, I guess, that he was going to continue on the story of Bubba, for better or worse. Now, pretty much everybody in the first movie, I won't say what happens, but there's just not a lot of characters left over, let's put it that way. Pretty much everybody's gone. The second one, Dark Night of the Scarecrow 2, which came out in 2022, is when Chris Reimer and her young son Jeremy are forced to relocate to a small rural community. They have no idea of the past terror that their presence reawakens. More so the son, because obviously Bubba was, you know, friends with children in the first movie, and then Bubba starts going on a killing spree in this one, which it's a little weird because some of the motivations in this movie are a little too twisty. I can get past a small indie budget if the story is actually kind of cool. The acting in this one, it's pretty average or below, but the storytelling in this one was definitely not as strong as the first movie. If it doesn't like 100% nail it, a sequel can be just forgotten about. And I'm not trying to say that this is a movie that should be forgotten. It just pales in comparison to the first one in such a way that it's really hard. Now, Ray Bradbury did give him some pointers on this movie, and J.D. Feigelson actually did write and direct and produce this film as well. So I just don't know if I like this one as much. I like the idea that there's a killer scarecrow. I think that's an infinitely really cool idea, but it just doesn't work in this movie. Even though this is only an hour and 25-minute movie, it feels a little long. Let's put it that way. He treated the scarecrow with its movements in a familiar way, which don't want to spoil anything, that I thought he did a really good job of making sure that stayed the same. Although if you look in the trailer, you can see that he has dead soul eyes or something that stares out through the burlap sack on his head. It's a little bit more mystery and like sleuthy than it is murder and slasher. And the first one was kind of that way in a way, but it still had that suspense and that atmosphere and that score that went along with it. And personally, I just didn't like this particular iteration, even if it is an extension of the first movie, made by the same people, pretty much. But yeah, I'd have to give the first one probably a 7.5, and this one a 4.5 out of 10, maybe probably 4. I'm leaning a little bit more 4 on this movie. It's definitely watchable, and I've seen far worse movies than this. Some people, if you're not used to independent films, might be pretty opposed to it, so it's not going to be mainstream, just know that going in. But there are some genuinely cool moments. It just doesn't really develop an atmosphere, and the characters aren't as good as the ones that were in the first one. But yeah, they had a smaller budget. They're gonna have some limitations there, but even still, it just didn't grab me. Both of these movies, Dark Knight of the Scarecrow 1 and 2, in 4K, which, by the way, both of them, especially the first one, looks beautiful, but I'm gonna get into all the details on that right now. So let's go over that. Obviously, you see the cover here with the burlap sack, the eyes, and the mouth hole, which is always kind of cool. I really like the burlap face sack in this. It's very different than Jason in part 1, or in part 2, excuse me, his part 1, I guess I should say. And I like to see it on the cover here. I'm not too blown away by this cover, but it gets the job done. We don't have any flip side of that. Some of the side here. Got the back, some of the characters on there. The clarity of this is really good. They did a progressive quantization, I think that's what they call it, on this for the HDR in this. So it looked good on my end, and I got a standalone player. It does beef it up a little bit, but it looked really crisp. The format is going to be a smaller box format. So it's going to be just the box, but in 4K, if that makes sense. So you'll have black bars on both sides of it. It really didn't bother me that much, and I guess it's just the way they shot the movie. So aspect ratio is 1:33:1. It's not rated. It's in English and Spanish subtitles for SDH. We got the Dark Knight of the Scarecrow 2, which is stereo and Dolby Digital 5.1. That's in aspect ratio 16:9, 4K obviously, and optional English subtitles. Some of these special features on this, they have a triple fan commentary hosted by Heath Holland from Serial Midnight Podcaster, and Robert Kelly, which is a noted film historian, and Amanda Reyes, who's an expert on TV movies, an author, and also a podcaster, which I did listen to a little bit of it, but I didn't give it the whole thing because there's a lot of extras on this one. They also did an original commentary track with writer J.D. Feigelstein and director Frank DeFelita. There's a new 2023 commentary by J.D. Feigelstein. We also have a video featurette with Bubba Didn't Do It. Bubba Didn't Do It! 30 Years of the Scarecrow by Daniel Griffith, which was really entertaining. Kind of watch and kind of like how the story came about. They do talk a lot with JD, but they also talk with other people like Stuart Gordon and other like horror people in the genre. So there's quite a few people. We also have another video featurette of the Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. It's a cast reunion Q&A recorded at the 2011 Fright Fest Film Festival, and a video feature from 1981. It's the CBS world premiere broadcast promo, which is pretty cool. They have the 1985 CBS network rebroadcast promo and a photo gallery of behind the scenes stuff. So it is pretty chock full of goodies. You have your discs here. So the first one is going to have both 1 and 2 on the disc. And then the second one is a Blu Ray that has all the extras on it, so you can just check it out there. But yeah, I thought this was a pretty great release. Even though I didn't like the sequel so much, it's still nice to have as a collector. I like to collect even the bad movies because, I want to be able to go down the road sometime, and you never know. Sometimes when you rewatch these films years later, it really does change your opinion. But this is out now. It's actually out for like $26 to $32, depending where you buy it. I'll give you links to MVD, Diabolic DVD, and Amazon. If you want to buy it from Amazon, any of the links that I have for those gives us a little bit of change. They throw maybe like a 50 cents at us if you buy a copy. But hey, every bit goes to help out a new computer for me because mine's starting to die. Check this out if you get a chance. Are you a fan of this movie? Are you a fan of the sequel? I would be interested to hear if anybody's seen the sequel. because I didn't. I thought it was the first movie when I saw it pop up. Let me know what you think about these movies, this set. Are you gonna pick it up for yourself? I think it's pretty cheap and worth it if you're a fan of the first movie especially. Otherwise, maybe, you know, you could just rent it and watch it there. But thank you, VCI Entertainment and MVD Entertainment, for sending this one out to me. Really enjoyed it. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. Leave me a like, a comment, subscribe, hit the little bell notification so that I just am elated and happy. I've got so much more coming to you guys. I've been planning Voidtober in October, so be prepared for that. And so much more. So be on the lookout. It really does mean a lot to me, and I love you guys for it, so thank you. But thanks for coming by, and as always, long live the Void.